coming to technology, I know that you are very much embracing technology in the art market. And you were in an art talk. You were talking about um, a Picasso work, which is sold to 36,000 people, and which was
Oh,
shown
yes.
in Zurich Museum. Could you tell us a bit about that? I think this is a very encouraging thing for blockchain investor and a future of art market. Which I have a couple of questions following that project.
Yes. That example that you're mentioning already happened now, I don't know, 2, 3 years ago. There was a gentleman in Switzerland who had a very successful website selling second-hand watches, and mostly Rolex watches and other collector's watches. And one day he was offered a work, not an important work by Picasso, but nevertheless a genuine work by Picasso, and he was asked $3 million for it. So he thought, why don't I try and see how my client base will react to it if they can buy a tiny part of the Picasso. And so he put it on his website, and he raised the $3 million in 12 hours. And I think I can't remember how many thousands of people participated. So people were paying, $100, $150 each. And each then felt, well, they owned that Picasso. They all owned a tiny share of that Picasso. And then this gentleman who had the website contacted the museum in Geneva and asked them whether they could have whether they would hang it up and have a camera directed to the painting, so that all his several thousand investors could check on their own Picasso. This is what happened. Not only did they want to check it on their websites, but they also went to the museum to check it in the flesh. So the museum was thrilled because they got many more visitors who all wanted to come and look at this Picasso. So that shows that there is also a market, not for the whole thing, for the whole painting, but there is a market for a fraction of a painting. So if you cannot afford the whole Picasso, maybe you can afford just one little stroke of the pen, and for whatever you contribute to it. And I think that's where new technologies are fascinating. I was expecting, after that story happened, sorry, I have to again put this message aside. I was expecting, after this happened, that there would be immediately a market developing very fast for fractions of paintings, and so that you would have an active market for that. So far, it hasn't really happened yet. I guess it's complicated to do it with blockchain, etc., so that it works easily everywhere, but it is very conceivable that we could get there, in the same way that a lot of people bet on horses who cannot afford to buy a racing horse, but they regularly spend money and make money by following horse races. You could imagine that that whole segment of the art market could be vitalized if you found the right way of doing it.
Exactly. Actually, about 10 years ago, there was an art entrepreneur from Paris. Maybe you heard about him, Pierre Naken. He wanted to launch something like that, European Art Exchange, together with Yvonne Lambert Gallery. And they decided to sell a Sol Levitt painting and Lazzoli painting, Vezzoli painting in 13,000 pieces, each selling corresponding price. But that project eventually didn't come to a conclusion, and so far since then, I couldn't contact Pierre Naken, and I don't know if you heard about this story yourself.
I had not heard about this particular one, but every now and then you hear of similar stories. But the reality is that we don't yet have really a proper market to speak of for a fraction of an artwork. Now, why hasn't it happened yet? I don't know what the answer is. Is it because if you have a painting, you want to own the full thing and you want full ownership? But look at the music business. When you have big songs, big hits by the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, or you name it, very often the rights to these songs are not owned just by one person, but you have different people who own parts of these songs. So you have a publishing house that may own 50%, you have the artist himself who may own another 40%, and you may have yet somebody else owning 10%. So you have fractional ownership of the rights to a song, and therefore why can't you have fractional ownership of an artwork? Of course, the artwork cannot be cut up in lots of little pieces. So the artwork will always stay, intact. And when you look at the artwork, it's an abstract thing in any case to think, do I own it or don't I own it? Is your pleasure the same looking at it if you know that you own it, or just looking at it? I mean, when you go to a museum, it gives you intense pleasure, even while you know that you will never ever own any of these works, and not even a fraction of these works.
Exactly. But in China, in 2010, in Shenzhen Art Exchange, and after Shenzhen, in a couple of other cities, there was a burgeoning these art exchanges, and then finally they had to close them. It's because of this heavy speculation of these shares. There was a couple of Chinese artists, and his work was sold in pieces. And these stocks, like I say, stocks exchange hands so fast, and that created kind of a tulip bubble. And then finally, Chinese government had to intervene to close these exchanges. So that was around that time that Pierre Naken wanted to, develop this idea. And the art exchange is just a good idea, as you said, but it's so open to, it's so vulnerable to speculation, of this kind of speculation. So we need very solid legal legal framework to fix this issue. But I think it's a beautiful market. I would love
I
to own
think, yes.
a piece of Picasso.
I think a lot of these examples, it's just very early attempts at doing something which then in due course will happen naturally. So I think maybe these attempts were just a little too early, and that once we will have the framework that you mentioned in place, that they will then automatically happen. One big thing that has happened as a result of COVID is that before there was a very clear calendar for the market. The auction had a clear calendar. The main auctions were always taking place in May and November in New York. You also knew when the main auctions were in Hong Kong, when they were in London. And now that whole auction schedule has fallen into shreds. The other rule was that the main auction houses had to do their auctions at the same time. So Sotheby's, Christie's, and Phillips, the only area in which they did collaborate was in the calendar. So there were always on 3 subsequent days. Well, that's now also out of the windows. Christie's decided to do their main November sale for Impressionist and Modern Art on the 6th of October. Sotheby's initially said they were going to stick to their November date. And now, very recently, I heard that they were moving it to the 28th of October. So this means we're more and more moving towards a market that is happening all the time and around the clock, and which is good for a market, because you don't want the market to be too seasonal. You want the market to be a 24/7 market.
Exactly. So this makes a continuum of sales, which makes art market much closer to the other investment markets, very similar. So that was an obstacle for the art market, because you couldn't exchange art on a 24-hour 7-day a week basis. But now this is possible. Another thing which is possible for me is to give to create liquidity for many artists, not just the top of the top. These online auctions and online selling possibilities. What do you think about that? Do you think that that will create lots of liquidity and activity in the market in terms of sales?
Well, I think it's a good thing if you have more opportunities of selling something, as opposed to having to wait each time for a cycle of 3 months to have happened, or 6 months even in some cases, until your next opportunity to sell something. So that helps creating liquidity more quickly. Then, of course, you have financial institutions. You have also some of the main auction houses who are prepared to lend on artworks. So they will lend maybe 50% of the low estimated value of an artwork. And so you can borrow based on your collection, because a number of big collectors have 95% of their wealth tied up in art. And so live very, very modestly. But if and when they suddenly need to create some liquidity, they have the possibility of creating liquidity this way.
There is a new development in Turkish in this Turkish auction house, Artam. I don't know if you know the owner, Olgaç Artam and his father. They just introduced a section in their on their website that from collector to collector, collectors can exchange goods, exchange art this way. Anytime they want, by just being member to this company online membership, and then they can sell their collection to other collectors, without any auctioning. So that creates a different move. It puts an auction house on a different side of the secondary market. I mean, auction house behaving as a gallery. What do you think about that? That can help to also young artists as well, to increase their marketability. By this, collectors may exchange goods, arts that
Yes.
they don't need or like anymore.
Well, I would make two comments. One about collectors selling directly to collectors. The art world is relatively small, despite the fact that it has become much, much wider over the last few years. And so, but even when you have two well-informed collectors who try and do a transaction directly, it's always much, much easier when you have an intermediary in between and who can act as a kind of go-between. And I don't say this because I am one of these intermediaries quite often, but I have found it so often the case that it's simply very difficult to have collector-to-collector direct transaction. Now, with all the new technologies and with all the things we have been mentioning earlier, of course, transactions will become easier and more accessible to everyone, and more and quicker to implement for the reasons we've mentioned below. And auction houses for quite some time have been much more than just auction houses, because let's not forget that if you count the volume of private treaty sales that Sotheby's, Christie's and Phillips are doing on a yearly basis, that puts them in the top league of top dealers in the world, not only top auctioneers, but top dealers. So for a long time now, auction houses have also done the works of art dealers and of galleries. And I've been surprised in a way that so far, none of the top dealers have decided to do auctions and organize auctions themselves, because they have all tolerated the big auction houses to, in a way, walk more and more on their territory. And so far, it really surprises me that none of the top dealers have decided to walk on the territory of the auction houses.
According to you, what could be the reason? The cost of intervening into this market, or I mean, given now that auctions are online, why not
I
try?
think any first step is tough to take and requires somebody to be very bold. And so I think it's purely a question until the first highly respected gallery will have done that step, and then the rest, everybody will follow. So, but the art world is fascinating, that very often, whether it's artists or gallerists or actors in the art market, they're very conservative in their approach and not very bold in trying out new ideas. And you always try to defend the status quo as opposed to venturing into new areas or trying totally new things. And let's not forget, it needed COVID to have brought about this big technological change that we've mentioned earlier in the auctions.
And that's right. So, do you think that, for example, all the actions taken, for example, David Zwirner Gallery, to promote other galleries in the world, smaller galleries, what do you think about this action? And do you think that can help smaller galleries, relatively smaller galleries, to keep battling in this highly competitive world?
No, I think it's great. What David Zwirner has done is fantastic and laudable. And of course, what we have not touched on so far in this conversation is the art fairs, because for the galleries and dealers, the main way, in the same way that the auction houses had their big auction days, were the big art fairs. And that's when all the collectors came together and had the chance of seeing these artworks. And all the top art fairs so far in 2020 have been cancelled, and already beginning to be cancelled for the first half of 2021. So that, of course, necessitates different outlets for the galleries. Now, some galleries are selling very briskly and have adapted quite well to the new situation, but for other galleries, it's been very, very hard and very difficult. So one will see quite a big change there. I think that access to social media is a very important way to increase that access. And we've seen a number of actors in the market making very clever use of social media to increase their footprint and their direct impact with clients. But at the same time, when you mentioned online showrooms, there is digital fatigue. Every day you are bombarded by so many galleries who ask you to go into their showrooms, and simply, even if you're not busy, but you simply don't want to spend your whole day entering websites and looking for works on those websites. So that's an interesting thing. So on one hand, the online offers you wider access. At the same time, you have to do it in a way that wins over digital fatigue.
Yeah, this is a really Damocles thing. It's not easy to find this perfect equilibrium, and I think the galleries need some professional help. Do you think that at this point, some art tech companies can offer better professionalized services, providing social media support and comfort for small and medium galleries?
You mean people specialized in social media, knowing how to increase your audience?
Preparing viewing rooms and preparing other type of activities. I mean, there are some which work on membership basis. Basically, I'm talking about UK companies, UK tech companies. Victor Miro, for example, work with one of them.
Yes, certainly makes sense if those companies can really make a difference. Then if they have the expertise and the track record in transforming your footprint in the social media, then definitely I think if that was a proven kind of track record, then I'm sure there would be a strong demand for it.
Yeah.